Please save my baby, begged the single mom. But when the millionaire looked into her eyes, our story starts in a small, quiet town where a woman named Sarah was fighting for her son's life. Sarah was a single mom, struggling to make ends meet. Her job at the local diner barely covered the bills, and her son, Jake, had been sick for weeks. The doctors were unsure of what was wrong, and with each passing day, her son's condition seemed to worsen. One cold evening, as Sarah walked to her car after another long shift, she received a call from the hospital. "Miss Bennett, we need you to get here as soon as possible." The nurse's voice was urgent. Her heart raced as she hung up the phone, not sure what she was about to face. She rushed to the hospital, her mind clouded with fear and desperation. When she arrived, the doctors were already preparing her son for surgery. The procedure was risky, but it was their last option. Sarah held her son's hand, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "Please save my baby." The doctor nodded, reassuring her that they would do everything they could. Sarah barely registered the man sitting in the corner of the waiting room, his presence almost unnoticed. He was dressed in a tailored suit, his expression a mix of concern and contemplation. He was a stranger, someone who didn't belong in this hospital, yet there he was, watching her. She glanced at him once, but quickly turned her attention back to her son. Little did she know, this man, Jack Dawson, was not just any stranger. Jack was a millionaire, the CEO of a successful tech company. He had come to the hospital not for business, but for something far more personal. He had been dealing with his own family issues and had stumbled upon Sarah's story while visiting a friend. The desperation in her voice had struck a chord with him, and he couldn't look away. As Sarah continued to sit by her son's bedside, Jack's mind raced. He couldn't shake the image of Sarah's tear-streaked face, nor could he ignore the sense of helplessness she carried with her. Something about her, her strength and vulnerability, made him feel a deep connection. He walked up to her, clearing his throat. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Sarah looked up, surprised to see the man from earlier standing beside her. She hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "I don't think you can help," she replied softly, wiping her tears. "My son needs surgery, and I don't have the money for it. I don't know what to do." Jack hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a calm, reassuring voice. "You don't need to worry about that. I can help." Sarah looked at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You can help?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jack nodded. "Yes, I'll make sure your son gets the care he needs. No one should have to go through this alone." Sarah didn't know what to think. Was he serious? Was this some kind of joke? But his eyes held a sincerity that she couldn't deny. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that things might get better. Jack made arrangements for Jake's surgery and stayed with Sarah throughout the process, quietly observing from a distance. Sarah never knew that Jack was a millionaire, nor did she ask. She was just grateful for his kindness. As the surgery progressed, Jack couldn't help but be drawn to Sarah's warmth. He saw how she held on to hope for her son, even when everything seemed lost. It was in that moment that Jack realized something. The connection he felt with Sarah wasn't just about helping her. It was something deeper, something that he hadn't felt in years. As the hours passed and Sarah's son was stable after the surgery, Jack found himself thinking about her in a way he hadn't expected. He knew that he couldn't just walk away from this. The bond that had formed in that hospital room was undeniable. And when Sarah finally learned who Jack truly was, everything changed. But that story is yet to unfold. Sarah sat in the waiting room, her hands trembling as she clutched the small, crumpled envelope containing the hospital bills. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear and exhaustion. She could still hear the doctor's words echoing in her head. "The surgery will be expensive, but it's the only chance we have." The thought of her son undergoing a risky procedure, all because she couldn't afford to give him the treatment he desperately needed, was more than she could bear. And then there was Jack, the man who had appeared out of nowhere, offering her help without a second thought. Sarah didn't understand why he had done it, or what he expected in return. All she knew was that, for the first time in what felt like forever, someone had shown her kindness. A kindness that felt genuine, without strings attached. But why him? Why her? Jack Dawson wasn't like the other men she had known in her life. His demeanor was calm, controlled, and there was something about the way he looked at her that made her feel seen, in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. But still, the questions lingered in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a random act of charity. As Jack sat beside her in the waiting room, he glanced at her, his eyes softening as he spoke. "You've been through a lot, Sarah. I can't imagine what it's like to be in your shoes." She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you." He nodded, though he seemed lost in thought. "I know you don't know me, but I just wanted to help. No one should have to go through this alone." Sarah turned her gaze back to the door of the operating room, where her son had just been wheeled in. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder with each passing second. Jack could tell she was overwhelmed, but he wasn't going to push her. He had done what he could for now. Still, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that their paths had crossed for a reason. Over the next few hours, Jack stayed by Sarah's side, offering quiet comfort and reassurance. He watched as she struggled with her fears, her worries for Jake's future. Despite her circumstances, she never once gave up hope. It was a strength that he admired deeply. Jack had met many people in his life, but there was something different about Sarah. She didn't have the polished exterior or the pretentious attitude of the people he was used to. She was real, and for the first time in a long while, Jack felt like he could be real with someone too. He had spent so many years building his empire, focusing on success and wealth, but somewhere along the way he had lost sight of what really mattered. As Sarah sat beside him, her hand clutching his in silent gratitude, Jack knew that helping her wasn't just about doing the right thing. It was about something deeper, something he had been missing for years. Hours passed before the doctor finally emerged from the operating room, a tired but hopeful look on his face. "The surgery was a success. Your son is going to be okay," he said, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah allowed herself to breathe. She closed her eyes, a wave of relief washing over her. Jack could see the tears welling in her eyes, but this time, they weren't tears of fear, they were tears of gratitude. Sarah turned to him, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you. You saved my son's life." Jack gave her a soft smile. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad I could help." But deep down, he knew that this was just the beginning. Their connection was undeniable. It wasn't just about saving her son, it was about something more. Something that neither of them could explain, but both of them felt. Over the next few days, Sarah's life slowly started to get back on track. With Jack's help, she was able to pay for the medical bills and get the treatment Jake needed. But what she didn't know was that Jack wasn't just helping her financially. He was beginning to care for her in ways he hadn't expected. He found himself thinking about her long after he left the hospital. He couldn't stop wondering about the woman who had shown him what it meant to truly care, to feel compassion without expecting anything in return. For Sarah, the days after Jake's surgery were a blur of emotions. She had her son back, healthy and strong, but she also found herself thinking about Jack more than she expected. She still didn't understand why he had helped her, or what his intentions were, but one thing was clear: she had never met anyone like him before. As Sarah returned to her everyday routine, she couldn't shake the feeling that Jack's presence had somehow changed her life forever. She had always believed in working hard for what she wanted, but now, she was starting to realize that sometimes, life didn't work that way. Sometimes, the universe had a way of showing you what really mattered. And for Sarah, that was Jack, the man who had given her hope, not just for her son, but for herself too. The man who had shown her that kindness still existed in the world, and that maybe, just maybe, there was something more waiting for her than she ever dreamed possible. In the days that followed Jake's surgery, the hospital room settled into a fragile calm. The steady beep of the monitor, once a reminder of fear, now felt like a heartbeat of hope. Sarah sat beside her son's bed every morning, brushing back his hair, whispering stories about the world outside, stories meant to soothe him as he healed. Yet no matter how peaceful the room felt, her mind kept drifting back to Jack. She wondered why he kept showing up, why he stayed long after he had fulfilled what she thought was a simple act of generosity. One afternoon, while Sarah was adjusting Jake's blanket, she heard a soft knock on the hospital door. She turned and saw Jack standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee and a small paper bag. He gave her a gentle smile, the kind that immediately eased the tension in the room. "I figured you could use something warm," he said, stepping inside. She hesitated before accepting the cup, the warmth spreading through her fingers like a tiny spark of comfort. "Thank you," she murmured, though her eyes lingered on him a bit longer than before. Jack sat quietly in the chair next to hers, watching Jake sleep. After a moment, he spoke. You are doing great, you know. He is lucky to have you. Sarah looked down at her lap, her voice barely above a whisper. I do not feel strong most days. I feel like I am barely holding things together. Jack studied her for a moment, surprised by her honesty. There was no facade with Sarah, no attempt to pretend she was something she was not. She was real, vulnerable, and yet somehow stronger than most people he knew. Strength is not about never falling apart, he said softly. It is about fighting even when everything feels impossible. His words hung in the air, and she felt something inside her shift, something she had not felt in a long time. Trust. For years, Sarah had carried the weight of survival on her own. Every bill, every late-night shift, every emergency, it had all been on her shoulders. The idea of someone standing beside her, even for a moment, felt almost foreign. But Jack was there, day after day, not because he had to be, but because he chose to be. Jake's condition continued to improve, and soon the doctors began discussing his discharge. The relief was overwhelming, but with that relief came a new fear. Once they left the hospital, what then? Would she be able to pick up the pieces? Would Jack still be around? One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the room in shades of orange and gold, Jake stirred in his sleep. Sarah leaned forward instinctively, adjusting his pillow. Jack watched the tenderness in her movements, the way she placed her palm on Jake's forehead with a quiet devotion. You are a good mother, Jack said suddenly. Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. No one had said those words to her in years. I am just trying my best, she whispered. Sometimes it feels like my best is not enough. Jack shook his head. Your best saved his life. Do not forget that. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them felt warm, not heavy. It was the kind of silence that only forms when two people begin to understand each other without needing words. The door opened, and a nurse stepped inside to check on Jake. As she adjusted the equipment, she glanced at Jack with a grin. Your husband has been very supportive, she said casually. Sarah's eyes widened, and she quickly shook her head. He is not. But before she could finish, Jack chuckled softly, lifting his hands in surrender. Just a friend, he said. The nurse raised an eyebrow, but said nothing more, stepping back into the hallway. Sarah felt her cheeks grow warm, and she busied herself with the blanket again. Jack watched her, an amused smile tugging at his lips. Do not worry. Nurses see drama all day. We probably made hers a little more interesting. Despite herself, Sarah laughed. A soft, genuine laugh she had not felt in months. And Jack felt it too. The shift, the magnetic pull drawing them closer. As the night settled over the hospital, Jack stood up to leave. I will be back tomorrow, he said, but then paused, as if choosing his next words carefully. Sarah, you do not have to go through the next steps alone. I am here, if you want me to be. She looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time, she did not see a stranger. She saw a man who had shown kindness that expected nothing in return. A man who stayed. A man who cared. And in that quiet moment, something inside her whispered that this was only the beginning. The days passed, and Sarah found herself growing more accustomed to Jack's presence in her life. He kept his promise, showing up every day at the hospital and even after Jake was discharged. He had insisted on helping her with the bills, and as reluctant as she was to accept, she knew she couldn't refuse. Jack's wealth, his generosity, and his kindness had become a lifeline for her. But with every passing day, something else started to change between them. Something more than just kindness, more than just friendship. Jack had become a constant in her life, and as much as Sarah tried to ignore it, the feelings she had for him were undeniable. He didn't just help her in practical ways. He made her feel seen, something she had long forgotten how to feel. He had this way of listening to her, really listening, in a way no one else had ever done. The depth of his attention to her, the way he asked questions and genuinely wanted to know how she was feeling, made her heart stir in ways she hadn't felt in years. She was afraid, though, afraid to trust, afraid to get her hopes up. She had been let down so many times in her life, and she wasn't sure she was ready for more disappointment. One evening, as Jack sat with her in her small apartment, talking about everything and nothing, he caught a glimpse of the sketchbook lying on the coffee table. Sarah had never mentioned it to him before, but he had seen her sketching occasionally, her hand moving fluidly across the paper. You draw? He asked, genuinely curious. Sarah hesitated, her fingers gripping the edge of her mug. She had always kept her art to herself. It was a passion she had never been able to fully pursue, not with the demands of being a single mom. It's just something I do. To pass the time, she said, avoiding his gaze. I've never really had the chance to focus on it. Life has always gotten in the way. Jack, however, wasn't easily deterred. He stood up and walked over to the table, picking up the sketchbook. Can I see? He asked gently. His voice was soft, like he understood the vulnerability she was feeling. Reluctantly, Sarah handed him the sketchbook. As he flipped through the pages, he stopped on one drawing. A detailed sketch of a park with children playing, the trees swaying in the breeze. It was beautiful, full of life, and filled with emotion. Jack looked up at Sarah, his expression sincere. You have talent. You should pursue this. Don't let life take that away from you. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She had always dreamed of opening her own art studio, but she had pushed those dreams aside. She had convinced herself that it was impossible, that she couldn't afford to take that leap. But Jack's words, his belief in her, stirred something deep inside her. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she could do more than just survive. I don't know if it's possible, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jack smiled softly and sat down beside her. Anything is possible if you believe in it enough. And I believe in you. Sarah didn't know how to respond. She had never had anyone believe in her like this before, and it felt both overwhelming and comforting at the same time. She felt her heart open to him in a way she hadn't expected. She didn't know what the future held, but with Jack by her side, she felt a glimmer of hope, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah and Jack's relationship grew. They spent more time together, talking about their lives, their dreams, and their fears. Jack shared more about his past, about the sacrifices he had made to build his empire, and the loneliness he had often felt despite his wealth. He was a man who had everything, but still felt like something was missing. For Sarah, it became clear that Jack's wealth wasn't what defined him. It was his heart, his ability to care for others, and his desire to make a difference in the world. He wasn't just a man of success. He was a man of integrity and compassion. Sarah, in turn, shared more about her own struggles, how she had grown up in poverty, how she had fought for every inch of progress, and how becoming a mother had changed everything. They had both been through so much, yet here they were, finding each other in a way neither had expected. But even as their bond deepened, Sarah still struggled with her fears. She knew Jack had the power to change her life in ways she couldn't even begin to imagine, but she also feared that one day, he would see her as nothing more than a burden. That thought plagued her, keeping her at arm's length. Jack, however, was patient. He never rushed her, never pressured her to feel anything she wasn't ready to feel. He simply showed up, day after day, proving that his intentions were genuine. It was on a quiet evening, as they walked through the park near her apartment, that Jack turned to her with a serious expression. Sarah, I'm not going anywhere, he said softly. I'm not here because I feel sorry for you. I'm here because I want to be. And I think you deserve more than just survival. You deserve to thrive. Sarah stopped in her tracks, her heart racing. She had heard those words before, but never with such sincerity. She looked at Jack, really looked at him, and for the first time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have a future beyond just getting by. And maybe, just maybe, that future could be with him. Weeks passed, and the more time Sarah spent with Jack, the more her life began to change. She started feeling more hopeful, more alive. She began to believe that maybe she could have the future she had always dreamed of, a future where her art mattered, where her son could grow up in a world full of possibilities. Jack was right there by her side, supporting her every step of the way. She found herself opening up to him more and more, sharing her deepest fears and hopes. He listened without judgment, and each time she shared a piece of herself with him, she felt a little bit stronger, a little bit braver. But there was still one thing that lingered in Sarah's mind. Jack's wealth. It was something she couldn't ignore, something that made her feel like she didn't belong in his world. He was a millionaire, and she was just a single mom struggling to make ends meet. The disparity between their lives felt like a constant weight on her heart, and she couldn't shake the feeling that one day, he would realize that she wasn't enough for him. It was during a quiet evening, as they sat together on the porch of her small apartment, that the subject finally came up. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow across the sky, and the air was filled with the sound of crickets. Jack had been silent for a while, and Sarah could sense he was deep in thought. She turned to him, her voice soft. "Jack, I need to ask you something," she said, her heart pounding in her chest. "Why are you still here? Why are you helping me?" Jack looked at her, his eyes filled with kindness and something else, something deeper. "I told you before, Sarah," he said gently. "I'm not here out of pity, and I'm not here to save you. I'm here because I care about you. I see you for who you are, not for what you have or don't have." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard him say anything like that before. She had spent so much time doubting his intentions, doubting herself, that she hadn't truly allowed herself to believe in him, in them. Jack reached for her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "I know you have doubts, and I understand that. But I want you to know that you are more than enough. You've always been enough." Sarah felt tears well up in her eyes, and she quickly wiped them away. She had been holding onto so much fear, so many insecurities, but in that moment, with Jack's words, it all began to melt away. For the first time, she truly believed that maybe, just maybe, she was worthy of love, worthy of a life that wasn't defined by struggle. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah's art began to flourish. With Jack's support, she was able to find the courage to open a small art gallery, showcasing her work for the first time. The opening night was a huge success, and for the first time in her life, Sarah felt like she was living the dream she had always imagined. Jack stood by her side through it all, helping with the logistics and offering encouragement every step of the way. But it wasn't just the success of the gallery that made Sarah's heart swell with pride. It was the way Jack looked at her. His admiration for her had never wavered, and with every passing day, she found herself falling more deeply in love with him. But just as things seemed to be falling into place, life threw a curveball their way. One afternoon, Sarah received a call from the hospital. It was about Jake. The doctors had called her in for a follow-up appointment, and there was a concern that his health issues might not be completely resolved. Sarah's heart dropped into her stomach. She quickly told Jack what had happened, and they both rushed to the hospital together. Sitting in the sterile waiting room, Sarah's anxiety was palpable. Jack sat beside her, holding her hand, offering silent comfort. She could feel his presence beside her, solid and unwavering, and for the first time, she didn't feel alone. The doctor came in shortly after, and after what seemed like an eternity, they received the news they had been hoping for. Jake was fine. There were no further complications, and he was in the clear. Sarah's relief was overwhelming, and she felt her knees weaken as the weight of the past few days lifted off her shoulders. She looked at Jack, her heart full of gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. Jack smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're never alone, Sarah. You have me, and you have Jake. You're stronger than you think." As they walked out of the hospital hand in hand, Sarah realized that her life was no longer just about survival. It was about love, about hope, and about the future they were building together. She had found someone who believed in her, someone who was there for her when she needed it most. And for the first time in a long time, she truly felt like she was enough. She had her son, she had her art, and she had Jack, someone who had shown her that there was more to life than just getting by. There was living, truly living, and for the first time in years, Sarah was ready to embrace it. As Sarah walked out of the hospital with Jack, a sense of peace settled over her. She had been through so much, yet here she was, standing tall with the weight of her fears lifted. Her son was healthy, her art was finally gaining recognition, and she had Jack by her side. It felt like everything was finally falling into place, but deep down, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something missing, something she had been afraid to face. The future, no matter how bright it seemed, still held questions. That night, after they had settled into the quiet of Sarah's apartment, Jack turned to her. The atmosphere between them had shifted, and she could tell he was thinking about something important. "Sarah," he began, his voice soft, "I've been thinking a lot lately. About us." She looked at him, unsure of where this conversation was going. "What do you mean?" she asked, her heart beginning to race. "I know things have moved fast, and I don't want to rush you," he continued. "But I want you to know that I'm all in. I'm here because I care about you, and I don't want to be just another chapter in your story. I want to be a part of the rest of it." Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. His words were exactly what she needed to hear, yet they terrified her. She had been so focused on surviving, on keeping her head above water, that she hadn't allowed herself to truly believe in a future with someone else. "Jack," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "I don't know if I can do this." "What do you mean?" Jack asked, leaning in closer. She could see the concern in his eyes, but also something else, hope. "I've never been good at letting people in," she admitted, her voice shaky. "I've spent my life protecting myself, and I'm scared that if I let you too close, I'll lose everything." Jack reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands. "Sarah," he said softly, "you don't have to be afraid. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to leave you." His words were like a balm to her soul, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt herself begin to believe in something greater than her fears. She had spent so many years convincing herself that she wasn't worthy of love, that she didn't deserve happiness. But now, with Jack's words sinking in, she began to see that she wasn't alone anymore. The next few weeks brought more than just emotional growth. They also brought new opportunities. Sarah's art gallery was thriving, and the more she poured herself into her work, the more she realized how much Jack's belief in her had fueled her success. He had given her the courage to take risks, to push past her doubts, and to finally follow her dreams. But as much as she had embraced this new chapter in her life, a small part of her still feared the unknown. One evening, as they sat in the gallery after hours, Sarah found herself looking at Jack with a sense of gratitude she couldn't fully express. He had become such a vital part of her life, but she still hadn't fully let go of the idea that he might not need her the way she needed him. "Jack," she said quietly, "I need to ask you something." "Anything," he replied, his gaze softening. "Are you sure about this?" "About me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," he said, his voice steady. "I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be you. I'm not here because of what you have or don't have. I'm here because of who you are." Sarah felt the walls she had spent so long building around herself begin to crumble. Jack wasn't like the others. He wasn't asking her to change. He wasn't expecting anything from her except for her authenticity, her love, and her trust. And that was more than enough for him. In that moment, Sarah realized something profound. She had spent so many years searching for validation, for someone to tell her that she was enough. But now, with Jack's reassurance, she understood that she had always been enough. She didn't need to prove anything to him or anyone else. Her worth wasn't determined by what she did or didn't have. Her worth was intrinsic, simply because she was herself. The following days were filled with a newfound sense of confidence. Sarah found herself moving through life with more ease, no longer weighed down by the constant fear of not being enough. She had Jack by her side, supporting her in ways she had never imagined possible, and more than that, she had finally learned to believe in herself. As Jack held her hand one evening, looking into her eyes with the kind of depth that made her heart flutter, she knew that this was just the beginning of something beautiful. She was no longer afraid of the future. With Jack, with Jake, and with her art, Sarah knew that she was finally living the life she had always dreamed of, a life full of love, hope, and endless possibility. As Sarah continued to embrace this new chapter in her life, she found herself growing more confident with each passing day. Jack's unwavering support had helped her realize just how much she was capable of, and she started to believe in herself more than ever before. Her art was flourishing, her gallery was thriving, and her relationship with Jake had never been stronger. Still, there was something lingering in the back of her mind, something she couldn't quite shake. As much as she had opened her heart to Jack, she still had doubts. Deep down, she feared that something might go wrong, that her happiness might slip away just as quickly as it had come. She had never been someone to rely on others for her happiness, and now that she had Jack in her life, she found herself wondering if she was truly deserving of all the love and support he was giving her. One evening, as they sat together in the quiet of the gallery after hours, Sarah found herself lost in thought. Jack noticed the faraway look in her eyes and reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "What's on your mind?" he asked, his voice soft and filled with concern. Sarah hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to put her feelings into words. "I've just been thinking," she began, her voice wavering slightly. About how everything is changing so fast. I'm not used to it. I've always been the one who had to figure things out on my own. And now it feels like everything is falling into place, but I'm scared. Scared that it won't last. Scared that I'm not good enough for you, for this life. Jack's expression softened, and he squeezed her hand gently. Sarah, he said, his tone calm and reassuring. You are more than enough. You always have been. I'm not here because I pity you or because I think you need saving. I'm here because I believe in you. I believe in us. Sarah felt the weight in her chest lighten just a little bit with his words, but there was still that nagging fear, that uncertainty, that she couldn't quite shake. Jack seemed to sense it, and with a soft smile, he stood up and gently pulled her into his arms. You don't have to be afraid, Sarah. I'm not going anywhere, he whispered, his words a balm to her anxious heart. As she stood there in his embrace, something in her finally began to give way. She realized that she had spent so many years pushing people away, keeping them at arm's length, because she was afraid of being hurt. But now, she understood that love wasn't something to be feared. It was something to be embraced, something that could fill the emptiness she had carried for so long. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Jack's relationship grew even stronger. They spent more time together, deepening their bond, sharing their dreams and fears, and making plans for the future. Sarah finally allowed herself to imagine a life where she wasn't just surviving, but truly living. Jack continued to encourage her to pursue her passion for art, and with his support, she took steps toward opening a larger space for her gallery. She poured herself into her work, creating pieces that reflected the strength and resilience she had discovered within herself. Jack, too, was there every step of the way, helping with the logistics, offering advice, and most importantly, reminding her of her worth. One afternoon, as Sarah stood in her new gallery space, taking in the progress they had made, Jack stepped up behind her, his presence as comforting as ever. You've come so far, he said, his voice filled with pride. Sarah turned to him, her heart swelling with emotion. I couldn't have done this without you, she said softly. You've helped me believe in myself, Jack. You've given me the courage to chase my dreams. Jack smiled, his eyes shining with sincerity. You had the courage all along, Sarah. You just needed someone to remind you of it. They stood together, hand in hand, looking at the space that would soon be filled with Sarah's art, her dreams finally coming to life. It was a symbol of everything they had built together, the trust, the love, and the belief in one another. But just as Sarah was starting to feel like she had everything she had ever wanted, life had another surprise in store. One morning, Sarah received a call from an unexpected source, a woman claiming to be Jack's ex-wife. The news hit her like a ton of bricks. She had never known much about Jack's past, but she never imagined there was someone else involved. Her mind raced with questions, doubts, and insecurities. Why hadn't he told her about his past? Was there something he hadn't shared with her? The weight of the situation pressed down on her as she waited for Jack to arrive. When he walked through the door, Sarah could tell something was wrong. His face was tight with tension, and his eyes were filled with a mix of guilt and regret. We need to talk, he said, his voice low. Sarah's heart sank. She had a feeling she knew what this was about, but she wasn't prepared for what came next. Jack explained that his ex-wife had reached out, wanting to discuss some unresolved issues from their past. There were no feelings left between them, Jack reassured her, but it was something he had to face for the sake of closure. As Jack spoke, Sarah felt the weight of his words sink in. She understood, but at the same time, a part of her couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy, a fear that something from his past might come between them. She looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. Jack, are you sure about us? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack's expression softened, and he stepped closer, taking her hands in his. Sarah, he said, his voice steady and filled with conviction. I'm more sure of this than anything in my life. You are my future. Nothing is going to change that. Sarah's heart fluttered as his words washed over her, and for the first time, she truly believed him. She realized that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. With Jack, she had finally found something real, something worth fighting for. As the days passed after that conversation, Sarah found herself feeling a new sense of peace. She and Jack had faced yet another challenge, and together, they had overcome it. Jack's ex-wife had come and gone, and nothing had changed between them. There were no lingering feelings, no secrets left unspoken, just the undeniable connection they shared. Sarah had finally learned to trust Jack fully, and that trust had deepened their bond in ways she couldn't have imagined. As they spent more time together, she found herself falling even more in love with him. She admired how he handled everything with such grace, his commitment to her and Jake, his quiet strength, and his unshakable belief in her. Jack had been everything she needed and more, but Sarah still felt a small tug of uncertainty in the back of her mind. Despite everything they had been through, she still feared that something might come along and tear them apart. She knew it wasn't logical, but the fear lingered, the fear that she might not be enough for him, that maybe one day, he would wake up and realize he deserved someone better. It was late one evening when Sarah found herself sitting alone in the gallery, staring at the paintings that now adorned the walls. Her paintings, the culmination of years of dreams and hard work. The gallery had become a success, and more than that, it had become a reflection of who she was, who she had become. She smiled to herself, proud of how far she had come, but then her thoughts turned inward, and the doubts crept in once again. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, she heard the familiar sound of the gallery door opening. She turned to see Jack standing in the doorway, his eyes searching for her. "Hey," he said softly, his voice filled with concern. "I was starting to wonder where you went." Sarah stood up, trying to shake off the doubts that had been consuming her. "I'm just thinking," she said, her voice betraying her. Jack stepped forward, his gaze softening as he took her hand in his. "About what?" he asked, gently leading her toward one of the paintings. She sighed, knowing there was no way to hide what was really bothering her. "About us," she said quietly. "About everything. I know we've been through a lot, but sometimes I still feel like I'm not enough for you." Jack's expression immediately softened, and he cupped her face in his hands. "Sarah," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "you are more than enough. You've always been enough." She shook her head slightly, unable to fully believe him. "You say that, but sometimes I wonder if I'm just not cut out for this. For all of it." Jack stepped closer, pulling her into his arms. "I need you to listen to me," he said, his voice firm yet tender. "I'm not here because I think you need fixing, and I'm not here to change you. I'm here because I love you. I'm here because you are exactly what I need." Sarah closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. She hadn't realized until that moment how much she had been holding on to. Her fears, her insecurities, the constant doubt that she wasn't worthy of love. But here was Jack, holding her, reassuring her, showing her that she didn't have to be perfect to be loved. She didn't have to have it all together. She just had to be herself. When she opened her eyes, she looked up at him, her heart full. "I love you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jack smiled, his eyes bright with affection. "And I love you," he said, kissing her forehead softly. "You're everything I've ever wanted, Sarah." In that moment, something inside Sarah shifted. The doubts that had once plagued her began to fade away, replaced by the quiet certainty that this was where she was meant to be. Jack wasn't looking for perfection. He wasn't looking for someone who had everything figured out. He was looking for someone who could walk beside him, someone who could build a life together. And that person, she realized, was her. With Jack by her side, she knew they could face anything the future might hold. Together, they had already overcome so much, and now, they were ready to take the next step. The future didn't seem so uncertain anymore. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and that was enough. As Sarah and Jack stood together in the gallery, surrounded by her art, she realized that her dreams weren't just about creating beautiful things. They were about building a life filled with love, trust, and support. With Jack, she had finally found everything she had ever wanted, everything she had ever needed. She had found a home, a partner, and a future worth fighting for. As the months passed, Sarah's life continued to unfold in ways she had never imagined. The gallery had become a well-known spot in the city, attracting art lovers and collectors from all over. Sarah's paintings, each one a reflection of her journey, were selling faster than she could create them. She had found her voice, both as an artist and as a person, and the support Jack had given her had been the foundation for everything that had come to life. But it wasn't just about the art anymore. It was about the life they were building together. Sarah had come to understand that the love she shared with Jack was real, not just in the moments of joy, but also in the quiet, everyday acts of care and affection. They had become a family, not bound by blood, but by something far deeper. As the seasons changed, Jack continued to be her rock, never wavering, always there, showing her that love was more than just a feeling. It was a commitment, a choice, and a shared journey. One evening, as they sat together in the gallery, the city lights flickering through the windows, Jack took Sarah's hand in his. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice filled with sincerity. Sarah looked at him, a smile tugging at her lips. "About what?" she asked, curiosity lighting her eyes. Jack took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage for something big. "About us. About our future," he said. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what was coming, but she could tell this was important. "What about it?" she asked, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her chest. Jack smiled softly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've been thinking about how much we've been through together, how far we've come. And I realized that there's no one else I would want by my side for the rest of my life. You, Sarah, are everything I've ever needed." Sarah felt the warmth of his words wash over her, but there was something more, something in the way he said it, something in his eyes. She could feel the weight of what he was about to say. Jack paused, his expression turning more serious. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to be with you through everything, through the good, the bad, and everything in between. Will you marry me, Sarah?" The words hung in the air, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. Sarah's breath caught in her throat, and her heart raced. She had never imagined this moment. Not like this, not after everything they had been through. And yet, here it was, the moment that would change everything. She looked into Jack's eyes, her heart filled with emotions she couldn't quite name. She had been so afraid of love for so long, afraid of trusting, afraid of losing herself in someone else. But Jack had shown her that love wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. The love they shared had made her stronger, made her believe in herself in ways she never thought possible. And now, standing before her, was the man who had been with her through it all, the man who had never given up on her. He had shown her what it meant to love and be loved in return. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she smiled, her heart overflowing. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." Jack's face lit up, a smile spreading across his features, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her close. In that moment, everything felt perfect, like they had finally found their place in the world, together. The rest of the evening was a blur of celebration, friends, and family, as Sarah and Jack embraced their new beginning. But for Sarah, the true beauty of the moment wasn't in the ring or the applause. It was in the quiet certainty that she had found her forever. With Jack, she had found more than just love. She had found a partner, a best friend, and a future filled with endless possibilities. As the night drew to a close, Sarah stood by Jack's side, looking out at the life they had built, at the life they were going to continue building together. She knew there would still be challenges, still be moments of doubt, but she also knew that with Jack by her side, she could face anything. For the first time in her life, she was no longer afraid of the future. With Jack, she had everything she needed. Together, they were unstoppable,